To a crowd of 28,000 people in Portland just a day after being interrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters at a campaign stop in Seattle, Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders released his plan to combat racial inequality. Interesting. Now, this platform describes policy proposals aimed at what Sanders calls the 4 central types of violence waged against Black and brown Americans. Now, he describes these as physical, political, legal, and economic, and he has a plan to try and hit all of those 4 different points. Now, this comes from the Huffington Post, and they report that Sanders had proposed a series of police reforms, including demilitarization of police forces, a federal program giving police body cameras, and increasing police transparency and accountability. Now, he also called for an end to mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent offenses, and of course, the disproportionate rate that which African Americans are targeted by police. Also address that. Quote, "It's an obscenity that we stigmatize so many young Americans with a criminal record for smoking marijuana. But not one major Wall Street executive has been prosecuted for causing the near collapse of our entire economy. This must change. We must address the lingering unjust stereotypes that lead to the labeling of Black youth as thugs. We know the truth that, like in every community in this country, the vast majority of people of color are trying to work hard, play by the rules, and raise their children. It's time to stop demonizing minority communities." Now, there's some other stuff that he has in this. He says he wants to expand the Voting Rights Act and restore the Act's pre-clearance provision. Now, that, of course, was gutted by the Supreme Court last year. Now, he also proposes ending laws that ban convicted felons from voting. I'm a little weird on that one. It depends on what you did. But then again, you could make an argument that they serve their time, they should have their rights restored. So, as I said, I'm not quite sure where I fall on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think that you should be able to vote. I mean, I think it's, people make mistakes. People, I think it's one of those things that, you should get your right to vote. But I know how sometimes it can be, complex. And sometimes you're just like, well, gee, this guy, there's murderers and rapists out there. Should they really, didn't they kind of forfeit that?
Yeah, shouldn't they? Should they be able to influence policy in their communities? It gets a little gray.
I understand that. Yeah, I do. But you know what? I also have friends that, they're very informed, astute people. And, years ago in their past, they struggled with addiction or something like that. And they've come a long way since that. And they can't vote. So, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, that's a tough one. That could be a whole show all on its own.
For sure. Now, I want to ask you, do you remember when Bernie Sanders was interrupted at Netroots, right?
Yes. I remember hearing about it. I wasn't there.
But, okay. Well, of course. Yeah. Now, do you think that he's learned from Netroots? You think he's learned to reach out to groups like Black Lives Matter since then? And
I'm going to say so, but I'm going to base that off of what's happened since Seattle. And when that happened, I had mixed feelings, as I'm sure you probably did too, Jeff. Part of me was like, gee, isn't this sort of like, hurting ourselves from the inside? I mean, this is a guy that dedicated so many years of his career towards equality and stuff and was active in civil rights. And this is a guy that's really on the same team here. And you interrupted him. I had those thoughts and I had that confusion because I like the Black Lives Matter movement and I kind of questioned that choice a lot and I wasn't a big fan of it. But the other side of it, since it happened, kind of reflecting on it after the fact, maybe he really did listen and he discussed those ideas and he's acting on it, as we're pointing out in this news. So in a way, maybe from the movement's perspective, let's talk to a guy that's really going to listen. And let's talk to a guy that's not afraid to throw some ideas out there. If Black Lives Matter would interrupt, something from Trump or something like that, it probably just would have been just a slew of hate coming from the media afterwards and from the base. But someone like a Sanders, he took it into account. I thought he handled it incredibly well. If you saw the statements from him where he was just pretty much like, hey, I completely support what these people are all about, but I'm not going to yell over them. I'm not going to do that. You don't want to hear me speak. I guess I'll just go somewhere else. I thought he handled it very, very well. And, you know, he had already been doing some things, but now he's doing maybe even more. And in a way, maybe in the big scheme of things, watching this story unfold, you know, this is kind of in a way democracy in action. He responded very diplomatically, which I think speaks to his character. Maybe in the big scheme of things, this will be seen as a way, like a way better platform, just a way better event for his entire campaign than it just would have been if, oh, Bernie Sanders talked to a lot of people in Seattle that liked him. You know, that's not super newsworthy. Seattle's a pretty left-leaning place. That's maybe in the long run, this will be a bigger deal for his campaign, which I think would be kind of cool.
Yeah, you know, you make an interesting point about, I think you and I were, as you said, you were critical of what they did originally during Networks Nation. I was too. I was like, hey, like, okay, you interrupt them, you make your point, and then you let them talk, right?
Yeah.
And so I disagreed with the way that they handled it, even though I disagree with the message. Obviously, Black Lives Matter, you know.
You agree with the message.
I agree with the message.
Yeah.
Like, Black lives do matter, and it's about time we all as a society kind of realize that. And, you know, just don't come back with the bull crap like, oh, all lives matter. Of course all lives matter. Duh. No shit.
Yeah,
maybe we as a society need to realize that all lives matter by pointing out how, hey, guess what? Black lives matter too, because they're the ones being targeted the most.
Yeah. You know what? All that all lives matter thing. At the end of the day, my reaction was, oh, this is why Twitter's bad. It's so annoying. That was the most annoying, obnoxious, small-minded thing. Ugh.
No, it's the most no shit statement in the world. Obviously, all lives matter.
But it's condescending too. When you take in the context of how it stemmed from, you know, Black Lives Matter, it was condescending, and it was just, you know, marginalizing what's been going on. And that's what was so irritating about it.
Right. But anyway, as I said, you know, I did some videos on this, and but I think maybe I'm going to come around to your conclusion. Maybe it has done some good in the way that they did things, because now you've got Bernie Sanders and you know, even Hillary Clinton talking about this more, and Martin O'Malley as well.
Yeah, I think there is both sides to it, and there is no one complete right answer. It just is what it is, and the best thing you can do is make the most of it. And I feel like Sanders is doing that. Now, if I would have been one of those people in attendance in Seattle, would I have been pretty bummed out? I didn't get to hear the guy speak. Yeah. So, you know,
well, I'd be more upset about what one of the protesters said. You know, you guys are all white supremacists in the crowd.
Yeah, I don't think I would have appreciated that.
I wouldn't have either.
Yeah, I don't think that, you know, not a flattering thing to say about somebody. No,
or a whole crowd of people.
Yeah.
Some of whom were saying, you know, let her speak, let her speak.
Right. So, well, you know, it's emotions are high, and, you know, it's one of those things, I guess. But
I guess to answer the question I asked you, yeah, I think he has learned from it. I mean, some examples of some of the stuff he's done since then. He condemned the death of Sandra Bland. He acknowledged the anniversary of Michael Brown. And on Saturday, he actually named Simone Sanders, which, by the way, no relation, right, as his new press secretary. Now, Simone's an African-American who also serves as the National Youth Chair of the Coalition on Juvenile Justice, which is a nonprofit that focuses on appropriate care of American youth in the justice system. Note it, all American youth, not just African-American youth. So I wanted to point that out. Now, she told BuzzFeed that Sanders is learning and trying to address the problems that affect the African-American community. She said, quote, one of my suggestions, he took it and ran with it on Meet the Press, is that racial inequality and economic inequality are parallel issues. I told him, you know, economic equality is an issue. It's something we need to address, but for some people, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter what your parents do. It doesn't matter that Sandra Bland had a job and was on her way to teach for her alma mater. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. And to kind of build on that point, I remember reading a story a couple of years ago that drove me kind of nuts. Now, we've talked Star Trek before on the show, right? You and me. So, you know LeVar Burton, Geordie LaForge, or as I know, also the Reading Rainbow guy. I mean, this is a guy I watched when I was a kid that got me into reading, right? So this guy, he wrote in a Huffington Post article, and he was also, or I don't think he wrote the Huffington Post article, but he was featured in an article and actually was filmed on a show saying this, talking about the lengths that he had to go to avoid being, shot and killed by police during a traffic stop. He said, listen, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is a practice I engage in every time I'm stopped by law enforcement. And I taught this to my son, who is now 33, as part of my duty as a father to ensure that he knows the kind of world in which he is growing up. So when I get stopped by the police, I take my hat off and my sunglasses off. I put them on the passenger side. I roll down my window. I take my hands. I stick them outside the window and on the door of the driver's side, because I want that officer to be relaxed as possible when he approaches my vehicle. And I do that because I live in America. Now, I've been stopped by the police before. I haven't had to do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had to take any special precautions to make sure that I don't get shot during a random stop.
Right.
That's amazing.
Well, and I think that one of the things all of this has brought to the surface, starting with, Michael Brown and unfortunately it's all still going, is you kind of do wake up to that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember for me, it was just as small as I would see stuff on Facebook that some of my, Black friends were posting about experiences they had. And it was just because of the color of their skin. Like a friend of mine posted something. He once asked a cop for directions. The cop told him to, the cop said, "Get the fuck away from me or I'm going to arrest you." I can't imagine what that would be like.
Right.
But he can, because he lived it. And, I think sometimes, I think one of the things is that everybody kind of needs to wake up to that. Because if you are awake to that, you're going to realize why hashtag Black Lives Matter is important, and why hashtag All Lives Matter is nonsense and condescending and disrespectful and marginalizing.
Mm-hmm. And like some of the people who don't understand, it's because they haven't lived this. They don't see the everyday realities. I mean, you and I, like, we're white guys. We never had to go through that shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that doesn't happen to us. We don't have to be cognizant of what's going on. So, we can ignore the racial issue. We can sit there and just and be ignorant to it because it doesn't happen to us, and then get mad when, people complain about it. Oh, what are you doing? If you just follow the rules, you must be doing something wrong in order to get that sort of attention. But what we don't understand, or some of us don't understand, is that even though you can play the rules, play everything by the rules, do everything by the book, not do anything wrong, you can still be subject to this because of the color of your skin. And that's what we really need to address as a society.
Oh, big time. And yeah, when they're trying to downplay it, or like, we'll just follow the laws and this and that, you know what? And I was going to do a video about this at some point, and I might still, but when I was young, I made some mistakes, as we all do.
Right.
But I made, I made some, and there was one point, and, I won't tell the story today. I'll tell it a different day, where I was under the influence of alcohol, and I called a cop whose head looked a lot like yours, Jeff. I called him Uncle Fester. And and I said some other stuff too, and here I am. I mean, like, not
so
saying
I assume
that
you were not beaten to death.
I was not beaten to death. I was not tased. I was not shot. I was not even arrested. He just was kind of like, "Shut the hell up." And
appropriate response.
Yeah, and looking back, I mean, I was stupid. He wasn't. Basically, what happened is my buddy was sideswiped, and my buddy was totally sober. I was not, because my buddy was the designated driver, and the cop, not excessively, but was being a little persistent at trying to see if I was driving the car after we repeatedly told him no, no, no. So I eventually got irritated, thinking my buddy was sideswiped. He's the victim, and all this guy's trying to do is trying to, pin me with a DUI or something like that. So I got a little smart alecky. Still, it was a mistake. The guy's doing his job. I should have just been cooperative. But you know, he was being a little douchey about it. But yeah, you know, I did that and nothing. I wasn't even arrested. You know, so there's an issue out there. You know,
there is, and once you realize there's an issue, it's kind of up to you. Like, you can't just ignore it. You have to address it, or else I guess it's that if you're not part of the solution, you're kind of part of the problem.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. And you know, as you keep hearing about more and more and more occurrences, you know, I'm at the point where I'm just like, I don't even know what the solution is anymore. Like I can't, like, I don't know. like we're just such, we passively accept so much violence in this country, which is why almost no other industrialized nation has problems to the capacity we do. I mean, we have more people killed by police in a year than most other nations do have in their history. And you know, it's reached an insane level. I mean, there was that Onion article where it's like, this could have happened anywhere, says country that only has those problems. Like,
right.
You know, I mean, it's one of those things. Like, I mean, a shooting happened in my neighborhood recently. There was a shooting that happened where I live, and it was like a movie theater thing. And it got some national press. It wasn't huge because no one got killed. But, you know, and the whole thing that you heard right away, this could happen anywhere. This could happen anywhere. And I'm like, it's time to start prefacing that. This could happen anywhere in the United States. Time we put that disclaimer out there.